plug thing up here?
Have an extension cord right there. Okay. He set it all up for us today. Look what he did for me.
Oh, that was your jump truck. We thought it was a security breach. Mark has it.
Okay.
Look what he did for me. Awesome. Right there. Yeah, I know. So I don't have to kill myself today.
Do you want me to grab it, Brian?
I don't think I really need. I may as well. Yeah, sure.
That works. That should be the simplest way to find it.
Yeah. We thought I needed it, then we didn't, and then I forgot.
Good morning, is it on?
These are on sale at Indigo right now.
Is it on?
for 14.
Good morning, everyone. If councillor and staff can take their seat, we'd like to start momentarily. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our December 5th ARAC meeting, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee meeting. We do have a long agenda today, so we need my colleague, myself, to keep the agenda moving. So we start with the declaration of interest. There's a statement I'd like to read. This is a public meeting to consider the proposal comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as item 3 and 5 on today's agenda. For the item just mentioned, only those who make oral submission today or written submission before the amendment are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition to the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of recipient of the application for zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment. A comment sheet is available at the door for anyone wishing to submit written comment on these amendments. Also, there's a sign-in sheet. We do have some speaker for some of the items, but if someone wishes to speak to any of the items we have, I will ask them to sign up now, please. So we'll go through our consent agenda. I don't see too many items we can consent on, but we start with confirmation of minute. Mr. McCary, thank you. City Manager's Office, item number 1, proposed 2019-22 term of council priority. We do have a presentation on item number 1. Item number 2, draft operation and capital budget, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee is item 2. We have presentation from staff. Item number 3 is the zoning bylaw for 3083 Upper Dwyer Hill Road. And the item is that Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee recommend council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for part of 3083 Upper Dwyer Hill Road for the purpose of rezoning a portion of the land from agriculture subzone 2 AG2 to agriculture subzone 6 AG6 to prohibit residential uses on a retaining farmland as detailed in document 2 Item number 2, the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approved the consultation detail section of this report be included as a part of the application. So on item number 3, okay, thank you. Item number 4 is formalization of 420 Osgood all-terrain vehicle. So we have a speaker on this item, so we hold item number 4. And item number 5, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, 1966 Roger Stevens Drive. Also will hold this item. We have speakers on that item. Information previously served is listed. Before we go to item number 1, which is Mark, where's my speaker notes? Before we start item number 1, I would like to say a few words. I want to start with a few words about the first 2 items on today's agenda, the Term of Council priority and 2020 budget for Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. Staff will give us presentation shortly, and I want to assure you that the amount of money earmarked for our rural community is much greater than what's in Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee budget alone. All told, draft budget 2020 invests $43 million in upgrades to rural infrastructure. That is an increase, a 4 years average of $39.7 million. And that doesn't account for increased funding for non-infrastructure investment in shared citywide services. More money for services like transit and paramedic will also benefit rural residents. Most rural infrastructure investments fall under the budgets of other committees. Bear with me, we only have 20 more pages left. For example, the city is investing $9 million to help reduce the risk of flooding through repair and replacement of rural culverts. That funding got considered at the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water, and Waste Management, which is my colleague to my left chair. Likewise, the Transportation Committee considered rural road improvement as a part of its budget. The Community and Protective Service Committee considered improvement to rural parks and facility. Let me assure you, those funds are still being targeted at the rural infrastructure renewal. The presentation from staff will get into a bit detail beyond what the ARAC budget is. They will tell us about major rural investment plan over the next year that are being discussed on other committees. Before we get to that thought, the first item on the agenda is a proposed term of council priority. It is worth pointing out that one major priority that is inclusive under ARAC mandate as a plan to develop and implement a rural economic development strategy and action plan. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both of my colleagues, George DeRuse and Scott Moffitt, working with staff and rural economic development growth. I'm excited about this and what it will mean for growth and future investment in our rural community. Both the strategy and the action plan to implement it will benefit us greatly, stimulating our rural economy and building on Ottawa's significant rural asset. I look forward to hearing more about this from staff in this coming month. I also would like to flag the other priority we're involved with is a new official plan for the city. The priority is only part under the mandate of Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. The Planning Committee also has oversight. On that item, I want to make sure you're aware that we will have joint meeting on Monday at City Hall to hear from staff about where things stand with the new plan. It's going to be a joint meeting between Planning Committee and Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee. They will also tell us how they are making sure the new official plan will remain consistent with the changing provincial policies. The meeting will take place at City Hall, and that started at noon on Monday. So if you are interested or want to come out to speak to committee member about it, you're welcome to join us downtown. The meeting will take place in the council chamber. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Don Herwire to do a presentation on council priority. Mr. Herwire?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It's my pleasure to be here this morning to present the 2019 to 22 term of council priorities. Whoa. I'll keep it brief. I know you have a full agenda today. As you know, the proposed term of council priorities were tabled at council on November the 6th. And today, the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee will be considering the following priority and actions that fall under its mandate. And as the chair noted, that's economic growth and diversification. In terms of next steps, on December 11th, these priorities will be considered along with the draft budget at council on December the 11th. So zeroing in on the economic growth and diversification priority. Next slide, please. One more. So as the chair noted, the strategy is intended to define and guide the city's direction, its priority areas, and really to create an action plan for our rural economy. It's been a three-phase development process looking at the economic and competitive analysis, with extensive stakeholder engagement, and identification of priority areas and actions. We're focusing on enabling a supportive business environment, a vibrant rural lifestyle, promoting tourism, and encouraging innovation in agriculture. And as the chair noted, it's also aligning with our new official plan and our Rural Affairs Office initiatives. So the work on, just a little teaser on the Rural Economic Development Strategy, which will be coming forward to ERAC in Q1 2020. We started work on that initiative late in the spring of this year, and we hope to be back here before committee to present the strategy and the action plan, likely in March 2020. So the strategy is intended to go beyond the traditional rural sector-based model, focused on agriculture, and we're looking to embrace policies based on the broader rural condition in the City of Ottawa, as well as looking at some of the emerging rural opportunities that we've seen. The actions from the strategy will be delivered in 2020 through existing budgets of economic development and rural affairs, and in some cases through some of our partners such as Ottawa Tourism. And again, just to reiterate that these priorities and actions will align with the new official plan. So just in terms of maybe a little bit of a teaser, as many of you know, the rural wards make up 80% of Ottawa's land area. We have a population in 2016 of about 86,000, which represents 9% of Ottawa's population. And the population grew 8% between 2006 and 2016. So it's a growing portion of the City of Ottawa. Interesting to note, it also has 10% of Ottawa's immigrant population and 10% of Ottawa's labor force, and has a very high median income in terms of the city. So it also has a $1 billion contribution toward the city's GDP, and there's over 1,000 businesses located in our rural wards, primarily focused on agriculture, construction, and tourism as the main three. So as you can see, rural Ottawa makes a significant contribution to the city's economy. The lifestyle has a strong appeal for our residents and new residents, and the rural wards are attracting a very diverse labor force. One of the things we've observed, and we can talk about when we bring the strategy, is there's a general lack of awareness and availability of some of the business support programming that's been deemed necessary. Investment readiness tends to lag compared to some of our other surrounding rural communities, and lack of transit and infrastructure were identified as concerns, and that would include reliable, high-speed broadband. Limited housing in our rural area to accommodate population growth and diverse portions of our population were identified, and creating more flexible policies to support small-scale and innovative agriculture was identified. So again, more to come when we bring the strategy to committee in Q1, but happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Hawaii. Any question for, okay, Mr. Vice Chair, I know you do have a motion also, but if you have a question first,
Just a
go
quick,
ahead.
thank you for the presentation, Mr. Herwire. You used a sentence near the end, you referred to investment readiness. Can you explain what that means, that we lack investment readiness in the rural areas? I think that's what you said.
I did say that. Yeah, we've benchmarked the rural part of the city of Ottawa with some of the other rural economies in Ontario. And it was identified that, yeah, I guess our business portions of our rural economy were not, I guess, ready or prepared in terms of growth opportunities that are there. And we can get into a lot more detail on that, but that was one of the findings of our research.
Okay, I'll talk offline
Sure.
with you about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So before the Vice Chair introduce the motion, Mr. Herwire, we heard quite a bit in the rural area about broadband and improvement to broadband. Now, and we see the provincial government talking about broadband, the federal government want to invest it. So do we have someone among our staff to follow up with those other level of government on the changes and how could we benefit from working? Because I'm a vice chair at Roma, Rural Municipality of Ontario, and also they are working with the provincial government and investing in broadband in the rural area. So do we have staff prepared for this?
Yes, our Innovative Client Services Department is working on a broadband strategy.
Okay.
There have been a number of meetings, and they're very much aware of the rural issue and are working on a plan for that, yes.
Okay. So the Vice Chair has a motion. Mr. Vice Chair, if you want to read your motion.
Whereas this report details the proposed 2019 to 2022 term of council priorities, and whereas the development of a new official plan is listed as an action item under the economic growth and diversification priority, and whereas the official plan falls under the mandate of both the Planning Committee and the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee, therefore be it resolved that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council amend Document 1, Draft 2019 to 2022 Term of Council Priorities, be amended to add Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee to the Standing Committee Oversight Budget reference for the official plan under the Economic Growth and Diversification Actions.
On the motion? Okay, okay, on the item? Okay, it's amended. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hawaii. Item number 2, 2020 draft operating capital budget. And we do have a short presentation, I believe, from our staff.
Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here this morning to present the highlights of the draft 2020 budget for Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee, also referred to as ARAC. My name is Shelley McDonald, and I'm the Manager of Asset Management and Infrastructure Services. We look forward to preparing the budget every year, and I would like to thank my team that works diligently behind the scenes to get us ready for today. Also in the audience, in order to help support if there are questions from you, Alain Gontier and Jen Nielsen from Infrastructure Services, Don Herwire and Geraldine Wildman from Economic Development and Long Range Planning, Leanne Stedden and Adam Brown from Planning Services, Isabel Jasmine from Finance, and Luke Gagney and David Ryan from Public Works Environmental Services. So here's an overview of today's activities with respect to the 2020 budget. So I'll go through the presentation, and if there are questions and comments, either through delegations or from you, and then we'll review the budgets and if there are any motions to amend, and then looking forward to the recommendation of the budget to council. There are two main service areas whose operating budget is under the purview of ARAC: Development Review Process Rural and the Rural Affairs Office. The Development Review Process Rural budget pays for the planning staff to review development applications in the rural area. The Rural Affairs Office also has an operating budget for staff and for rural grant programs, which they manage. More specifically, Draft Budget 2020 allocates $3 million in gross operating expenses to Agriculture and Rural Affairs, including $1.9 million for the review of rural development applications and compliance and zoning reports, and $1.1 million for the Rural Affairs Office, which supports asset improvements, economic growth, and community building in rural Ottawa. The changes in the operating budgets between 2019 and 2020 are to account for the potential cost of living increments and benefit adjustments in 2020. The draft 2020 budget has approximately $1.8 million for a new community building in the rural west community. It will expand the Corkery Community Centre. You may recall there was some funding in the 2019 budget to conduct a feasibility study and undertake the detailed design. The additional funds in the 2020 budget will be for the construction of the community building. As well, there's just over $6 million to renew city infrastructure assets. Some more details on the allocation of these dollars will follow shortly. By combining the growth and the renewal requirements, the total capital budget under the ARAC authority is $8 million. So in order to accomplish the initiatives identified in the capital budget, the draft 2020 budget will draw $5.3 million from Capital Reserve Fund, $1.8 from debt, and $892,000 from development charges. Now the good stuff. To give you an overall idea, the City of Ottawa maintains nearly $42 billion in 2017 dollars of existing infrastructure assets. All the city infrastructure assets are safe. We apply a risk-based approach and ensure that priority is given to those critical infrastructure assets. Roads, especially in the rural area, remain a high priority for Ottawa residents. The city is committed to maintaining roads based on industry standards. To manage the extensive road network, we apply recognized industry practices and are always looking for ways to improve how roads are built, maintained, and renewed. Infrastructure renewal makes up about 75% of the city's capital budget. When we consider the investments covered through other committees like Transportation, Community and Protective Services, and the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management, approximately $43 million is being invested to upgrade rural infrastructure, as the chair mentioned, up from the four-year average of $39.7 million. Between 2020 and 2023, the proposed budget forecasts $24.9 million to renew and grow infrastructure, mainly on the roads and the guide rails in the rural areas. We realize that residents are curious about the timing of infrastructure renewal, especially roads in the rural wards. Your office and city staff receive a number of inquiries on this topic. At the beginning of the 2019 construction season, we launched an innovative online capital construction forecast map on ottawa.ca that provides details of ongoing and planned construction projects in the City of Ottawa. This is a great tool that provides insight on timing of anticipated works, providing visibility on the sheer volume of projects that we deliver and the investments that we're making. And it also provides information related to road renewal strategies. We've received positive feedback about the website. So I encourage you to continue to provide that information as residents come through, because we do find it a very effective tool. So here are some highlights of the rural road upgrades planned for 2020. So approximately $2 million is going to be put towards upgrading and installing new guide rails as identified by staff through inspections, road projects, and complaints. There's $1.3 million to upgrade rural roads, including Murphy Court from March Road to the dead end, Ashton Station Road from Purdy Street to Franktown Road, Spruce Ridge Road from Pinebrook Lane to McGee Side Road, and McGee Side Road from Spruce Ridge to the west of David Manchester. So these are the highlights of the structure renewals planned for 2020 construction. Approximately $2.9 million has been identified to rehabilitate bridges on Mitch-Owen Roads, 8th Line Road, and the Piperville Road, the Bear Brook Bridge. These three projects are actively in construction, and I believe there's good engagement with your offices on these. Although much of this funding falls under the purview of other communities, as the chair noted in his opening address, draft 2020 budget invests, as previously mentioned, approximately $43 million to upgrade rural infrastructure. including approximately $12 million to replace and repair rural culverts and other structures, approximately $5.1 million for buildings and parks, including accessibility upgrades, and approximately $22.7 million for resurfacing, road preservation, and sidewalk renewal. The above are highlights of the planned resurfacing in 2020, including Ferry and Huntley Roads, Dalmany, Snake Island Roads, and Roger Stevens Drive. And there's also a project for some slope stabilization work along the 174. So in addition to the culvert investment approved under the Standing Committee on the Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management Committee, that really is a mouthful. Anyway, here are some other highlights that were approved at that committee. 1.15 million and 11.7 million towards the renewal of the communal well rehabilitation and the sewage pump station renewal. So these funding envelopes are for the retrofit, rehabilitation, and replacement of asset components at the city's communal well systems and the sewage pump stations. These pump stations are across the city. There's 500,000 identified towards municipal drainage works. So this is for anticipated capital works under the Provincial Drainage Act. These are legislative requirements. These include petitions for drainage improvements or changes that come in throughout the year. It is a cost recoverable program. And that is it.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. Any question about the budget? Okay, Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, this is one of the first budgets I've gone through. Is it normal to fund through the reserve of this amount?
So I'll ask
Looking at 5.3 million of this, or 66%.
I'll ask Ms. Jasmine to come up,
Thanks.
please.
Thank you.
Yes, typically, if it's a renewal project, we try to avoid issuing debt on those projects, and we put money aside in the capital reserves as part of the operating budget each year to pay for those projects on an ongoing basis.
And what about the debt, Ms. Jasmine? The debt is 1.8 million, where 23% of the capital funding is from debt.
I'd have to look at the details, but it's likely for a growth project. Let me just.
So growth, we can't issue debt, but for capital, for.
That's where we prefer,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, and okay. And that's normal, just,
Yeah, that's normal. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meehan. Councillor Derouz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for presentation. We're very happy to see the added dollar for our rural road. I just have a question. I know that I see some highlighted road that been done for 2020, but there is also more other road identified in the budget. Just for the context for the committee and for the knowledge that some of that money coming from different envelope. Am I correct on that one?
Through the chair, yes, you're correct, Councillor.
Is it the transportation envelope?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Derouz. See no more questions, so we have a roadmap motions moved by the Vice Chair Gower.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee 2019 draft operating and capital budget as follows. 1, Development Review Process Rural Operating Resource Requirement on page 2.
So we'll carry item by item.
Item by item? Yeah.
So on item number 1, the item carried. Okay, go ahead, sir.
2, Rural Affairs Office. Rural Affairs Office User Fees, page 5, and Operating Resource Requirement, page 4.
On item 2, carried.
Carried.
Okay.
3, the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Capital Program, page 6, individual projects listed, pages 12 to 23.
Item carried. So on item number 2, carry without amendment? Carry. Thank you. So item number 3, we carry. Item number 4, formalization of 420 Osgood All-Terrain. We have one speaker, I believe Ms. Penny McDonald. We're not going to have a presentation on this one, but staff available. I think Ryan Thompson somewhere in the audience. Ryan, maybe you can join on the table in case some question, and Geraldine as well. Ms. McDonald, you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
What button?
Is your mic is on?
Is it on now?
Now
Yes.
it is on.
All right, thanks. I am a resident on Blanchfield Road, and I live adjacent to where the ATV trail runs, and we have had a trial on since 2013, and I have presented at the meeting in 2013 as well as this meeting. And for the most part, we have seen that the trail riders are rule-abiding, good citizens, and it's not a problem. But there have been issues with drivers speeding, drivers doing donuts around people walking down the road, drivers with children on dirt bikes, racing. It's a beautiful long stretch of road, so it's not perfect. And yes, there is a process in place where we contact the city, and to the city's credit, they get back to me just to say, well, they weren't patrolling the trail at that time. Yes, this is a problem. So then we're presented with this finalization of the bylaw. And there are significant changes in the proposal that were not part of the test project. So the one that I want to address first is the time of use. It's back to 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. And in 2013, I pointed out that is actually contravenes the city's noise bylaws, which are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekends and holidays. So it is bylaw 2017255. So I wonder why people are using ATVs, and I guess snowmobiles, in contravention of city noise bylaws. My next problem are there 3 amendments. So besides the increased hours of operation to the bylaw, you want to extend the season of use to include winter months for snowmobiles. And there seems to be a formalization of the relationship between the ATV club and the snowmobile club, which actually makes sense. But we haven't had trials or a test period along the road where you have drivers on the road during periods of darkness. And we have not had a trial period with an increased snowmobile traffic on the road. There have always been a few, and I believe the law allows them to drive up the road allowance, and I have no problem with that. I mean, we are in the rural area, but I'm thinking that if the club is involved, traffic is going to increase significantly. So I just wonder, we're formalizing the law with these changes, and we had 6 years of trial. So it concerns me a little bit, a lot, actually. I'm also read the bylaw, or read the proposed law, and I looked at section 5 and 6, which involves expanding the trail network in Ottawa. And it describes how they want the ATV clubs and rural affairs to engage with adjacent landowners. But it's barely mentioned. That section seems to talk about how ATV clubs and snowmobile clubs are going to maintain the trails. So I was hoping, how does the city of Ottawa determine whether adjacent landowners support the trail or not? We all came out in 2013 along the section of Blanchfield Road and opposed. And we were told it wouldn't go on Blanchfield Road at the ARAC meeting, and yet it did.
I don't know who said that.
So I wonder, what is the criteria? Is there going to be criteria put in place so that adjacent tax-paying landowners are heard? And my last point is directed right at Blanchfield Road. We were made promises in 2013 2013 and 2017, and we hear nothing.
Okay. Before I go to my colleague, I'd like to ask you, when you said you were promised on 2013 by
Doug
whom?
Thompson stood up at the ARAC meeting and said, because of issues with the corner of Stagecoach and Blanchfield, it's at a sharp angle. And there have been near misses with cars all the time. Luckily, nothing has happened, and I don't want it to. But it is a safety issue, I feel.
Okay.
Some of the ATV drivers and the clubs, they don't feel it's an issue, and that's their opinion. We were also told the speed limit on our road mysteriously changed from 50 kilometers an hour to 60. And that changes the speed that the ATVs can move down the gravel road. And we actually spoke after the 2017 meeting with the ATV Club and Councillor DeRuse, my husband and I. And, you know, if there's a reason it can't be changed, just let us know.
So
We've heard nothing, and the speed limit hasn't changed.
So let me go to Mr. Thompson. Mr. Ryan, I don't believe that change of the speed on the road will reflect on a change of speed on the ATV. Is that correct?
Through the chair, no, that wouldn't make a change from 50 to 60 on the speed limit for the ATVs. It would still remain 50 for the ATVs.
The other clarification, I thought the city bylaw was from 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. Is that?
That is correct. That would bring it in line with the existing time limit for the snowmobiles that's been in effect for however long snowmobiles have been in use.
Okay, so any question from our staff, from our colleagues?
Excuse me, could I address, I don't want to argue.
No,
But
Ms. McDonough, no, it's not back and forth argue. You ask us a question, and I had to
Okay.
clarify, so I clarified. You can speak to Ryan after one-on-one. I'll be happy to do that. But maybe question come from Councilor DeRuse, clarify something.
Thank you for the clarification, and thank you very much, Ms. McDonald, for coming up. And yes, we did, in fact, was implemented back in 2012, 2013, before my time, but I was also part of the conversation between the ATV club and the snowmobile club. We actually, whatever the ATV club has been doing, which is they want to use those trails to make sure that they'll be able to go to the village to get some gas and be able to get to amenity restaurants and things like that, which is, we've been monitoring the situation for many, many years, and we know the ATV has been very compliant with the city bylaw and with the ATV club, and basically, I want to direct quick question maybe to Ryan, like how many complaints we've been getting from in the last 6 years? Like, can you just clarify to this committee, like the amount of issues? Can you just highlight? I'm not going into details. Like roughly, how is your year dealing with these trails in Osgood and specifically in the last 6 years?
This year, we've had approximately 4 contacts. And in the past 6 years, we've had 11.
In total?
In total.
And Councillor, I might just add that we had submitted our circulation to over 200 folks that adjacent to the pathway.
No, I know, and I've been hearing good feedback and some other feedback. But the thing is that the ATV has been working very closely with us, and to address a couple of those points that Ms. McDonald is doing, which is we're talking about the speed on the road. The speed on the road, which is it will not reflect on the speed on the ATV. So the speed there is 50. We also in the work plan for the road, we just actually paved or kind of did an actual treatment for Cabin Road and Gordon Murdoch, so that to eliminate the dust and to eliminate some of the issue that we've been having, because the ATV Trail Club also, they use Cabin Road, they go through Gordon Murdoch and go to the Osgood Main. And on top of that, also we are in the plan, Blanchfield will be resurfaced in between now and 2022. And when we do all these when we finish all these road work, including Snake Island, we have right now the data, the speed data that we are it's been used on our road, and we, accordingly to what was going to happen in the community after the paving, because usually before paving, people say there is speeding, but after you pave, the first, second complaint we get is there is more speeder. So we're going to do assessment on the speed on the whole in that area, specifically between Cabin, Gordon Murdoch, Snake Island, and Blanchfield. So that's from the speeds perspective, just so to ease that piece for you and give you that. It didn't go in deaf ear where I hear you, I'm listening to you, but also we're going to finish the road before we assess what kind of speed we need to implement on those roads. The season that we were discussed between the Snowmobile Club and the ATV Club, we have a lengthy meeting, and I want to thank the chair, Councilor Shantiri. I know took your time to come to Osgood, meeting with the ATV and Snowmobile Club and our staff. Ryan has been the lead on the project. We shortened. So they did some compromise between both clubs. And you can correct me on this, Ryan, if I'm right or wrong, but the lengthy season of the ATV was longer than what we liked it to be. We cut a little bit, we cut the time in the springtime, so there'll be period of the frost goes out and making sure the drainage is working properly. On top of that, all the snowmobile and all the ATV, they're like cars. They all have LED lights. They're all equipped with the safety equipment. And just to answer to come to some comment you made yourself, that we do have a problem in the village. You can take the trail today, take all the trail out, snowmobile or ATV. You're still going to see snowmobile and ATV in the community. If they are properly directed on the trail, and if they are properly guided to go to a restaurant, to gas station, and back on the trail, they wouldn't be all over the road in the village. And not necessarily, we cannot say that you can ban them. You'll never be able to ban them. But if we don't have a bylaw like this, we won't be able to also call the police or call the enforcement to be able to keep the good people that they're supposed to be on the trail or on the road from the people that they really abuse the system. And we have those, in between both clubs, in the ATV club and the snowmobile club, we have that group of people that they will not buy a permit. They go off the trail. So I understand, I don't want to make it a long, I want to make sure that we are addressing all the issue. We are having compromise between both club, the ATV and the snowmobile, and I think we do have a representative here from OFATV. We've been working with them in the last 6-7 years, and we cannot paint everybody in the same brush. So this is just some explanation to the committee, and Mr. Chair, you can add to it. But thank you very much for coming out, and I appreciate all the work staff has been doing.
Thank you, Council. Any question to the delegates? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Ms. McDonald, so one of the parts that you object to is the pilot project, if I understand correctly, the time that they had to stop doing the trails was 9 o'clock in the evening. Now we've extended it to 11. Is that?
In 2013, they wanted it from, dawn to dusk, and then I pointed out the bylaw, which on weekends and holidays is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. according to the City of Ottawa website. And so I was under the impression that the timing would be changed. And I understand, like, the Snowmobile Club was around way before amalgamation, so maybe their time limits are grandfathered in.
But you want to see them stop the activity at 9 o'clock?
There's kind of an anonymity in the dark. I mean, we're always told, oh, check and see if they're trail members. Okay. Well, how do you do that in the dark?
So so the time that's being proposed, the amendment would be, it would allow the drivers to continue till 11 o'clock in the evening?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Yeah. So why are we changing it? Why can't we make it at 9 o'clock? Continue to have it 9 o'clock?
Through the chair, that would just be to make things consistent across both groups because they're being managed under the same bylaw.
Any consideration, I mean, we tend to find out that, and not all snowmobilers do this, of course, but there are problems after hours with drinking. And if they knew that they had to stop, the trails ended, you had to be off the trails by 9 o'clock, there might be safer. Any consideration of that?
Through the chair, when consulting with the police unit that manages the trails, that hadn't really been a concern through that unit. They'd not really encountered much drinking on the trails in general. So they didn't see a concern with that themselves. It's still early enough in their view that it wasn't an issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McDonald, for your presentation. To staff, I hope you'll be preparing some communication to go to the rural area, explaining what's been changed or added. Also, I'd like to ask, because we get asked quite a bit from other area in the rural area, why can't we have similar bylaw in whether in West Carleton or Rideau and other? So can you just tell the committee and the audience what's required to be able to be a club? Like, what's the definition of a club?
At the moment, the easiest way is actually to join the OATV and sort of grow out of that club, Chair, and then create a route network in their area and approach the Rural Affairs Office, and we will review. It's outlined in Section 5, the requirements, and we'll help set up through a communication to the community and through the snowmobile clubs as well in the area, just to show that they can cooperate and work with the snowmobile clubs. And we'll work on setting up a network as long as it's not imposing too much on the community.
Okay, so I still would like to see a communication coming out from the Rural Affairs Office to be shared in our newsletter or the weekly, to explain the changes here. Also, I think Councilor Duru said something very fundamental. We've seen it happen in many times in a rural area, in the absence of the club and the permit, and then it's a free-for-all, especially for someone who have a Turbolton Forest in my community is about 600 acre. If you don't have signage trail, that means the environmental impact on all the small trees and vegetation will be severely. So having a club, and they are licensed by the city because they have a licensed occupation from the city, they have insurance on those trails. We groom them, they're multi-use. So I need all that information to be released in your in your communication, if you don't mind. Councilor Durus, you have a question for staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just want to clarify a couple things, and about specifically on why we extended the hour for the ATV, just for Councilor Meehan's to clarify a couple things. In the summertime, in the wintertime, the sun will go around 5 o'clock, it's dark. So that's for the snowmobiler that they have lights and they can drive. But in the summertime, ATV can go out till around 9:30, 10 o'clock before it gets dark. So for not to make it confusion for our bylaw and base our communication and our stakeholder with Ottawa Police, they rather to simplify one bylaw for both machines, for ATV or snowmobile, so we don't have two sets of rules. So that's one thing, and this is our consultation with OPS, and that was the recommendation. My question will be directed to Ryan. I know that we're voting right now, but I want to add to the chair, are you going to give us yearly report on what's going on, and you bring it back to this committee every year about the incident and the complaint and some kind of sort of part of our report back to this committee?
Through the chair, that would be a wonderful idea. I would very much like to do that.
And did we address the issue that we have another letter came from AgroDrain, and then they have some issues around that trail, specifically on Balmead Road? Did we address all these issues?
Through the chair, yes, we did. I had a conversation with the gentleman, and we've reached a resolution that use of the trail will stop until we have worked something out.
And did you also document Ms. McDonald's letter and making sure that we address some of the issue based on while we are going with the bylaw, so we can adjust and see if there is area we can tweak to help minimize the impact?
Through the chair, I have a copy of her comments, and we will be speaking after the meeting as well.
One more question. I know that I just want to make sure. Let's say I know that the of ATV club are here. If we need to ask them question, but I don't think it's necessary, Mr. Chair. But I have a question. And if in any moment the city decide to terminate that contract, and if do we need to have a motion, or we have every right if there is if something in the future happen and some nuisances, and so we realize that it's making impact in the community, and we need to change some of the bylaws. So do we need a motion for that, or what is obligation to the contract?
As far as I know, through the chair, as far as I know, I believe we can repeal through a motion, and there are options through the license of occupation and land use agreements as well.
I think we'll ask legal for that, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Depending on what is being brought forward, it can either be brought forward through a motion or a report explaining what changes need to be, or amendments that need to be made to the bylaw.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't know, do we have to put a motion, or we can just move forward with the base of the clause?
I don't believe it's necessary. I don't believe it's necessary, but my advice to the ATV club who's in the audience today, make sure you enforce the rules of the club with your membership. The same thing we tell the snowmobiler, because riding on our trail in our city is a privilege. It's not a right. So you don't want to lose that privilege. As you heard, that privilege can be removed with an motion of this committee or with a report to this committee. So we need to work together, and we need to live together, and we need to have enjoyment together. So that's my advice. I said it at the meeting to both groups, and I say it here again. To ride on those trails, whether you're a snowmobiler or ATV, is a privilege. Let's not lose that privilege. But Councillor DeRoos, we heard from legal. We can, if something happened, a report come in with the changes, and I think will be addressed by the committee and to revoke that if it's necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank everyone who worked with us in this. I know it's been a long time. It's been almost 7 years we've been working on this. I want to thank in specific Dave Baker. I know that you're here in the audience. I appreciate your leadership as an OFATV past president. I know Mike Starr and Chris has been working with us, with our staff, and your leadership, Mr. Chair, and many other, and also other leaders that from the Snowmobile Club that we work together to make sure that these trails are safe and we can accommodate them in the city of Ottawa. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor DeRoos. Any other question, comment on the report? So the report read that Agricultural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve permanently establish all-terrain vehicle trail network pilot project in Ward 20 Osgood as outlined in this report. And item 2, the bylaw, a bylaw to regulate the operation to all terrain vehicles and motorized snow machine, certain designated highway. And so on the report, Carrie? Carrie, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Item number 5 is the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, 1966 Roger Stevens Drive. So I'll ask staff to do their presentation.
morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee. Before I begin, I'll forewarn this presentation is a bit longer than typical, but the matter is complex, and I think it warrants the time. I'm hoping that a detailed presentation may anticipate any questions that may be about this proposal. Applications to amend the North Gore Secondary Plan and the city's zoning bylaw were received in July of this year. These applications examine the appropriateness to accommodate a proposed distribution warehouse facility at 1966 Roger Stevens Drive. The site is in the village of North Gore, located adjacent to Highway 416 and the Roger Stevens Drive interchange. Mr. Chair, to begin, I'd like to provide some background on the history of this site. The concept of a business park was initially proposed by the former Township of Rideau in their official plan in 1992. The regional municipality of Ottawa-Carleton, then the authority to approve local official plan amendments, deferred consideration until 1997. In that same year, the lands were redesignated from agriculture to general rural. Subsequently, this change gave way to the approval of the Jordell Acres subdivision and the rezoning by the township. Designed as an industrial highway commercial subdivision, the plan was registered in 2003 for 10 residential lots, 3 highway commercial lots, and 3 industrial blocks. Currently, the lands are designated in the secondary plan as highway commercial and industrial. The intent of the highway commercial designation is to accommodate commercial uses that are dependent on good highway access and visibility. As for the industrial designation, the intent is to accommodate uses that benefit the farming community and businesses that require visibility to vehicular traffic on Highway 416. Presently, the lands are zoned rural commercial with an exception, and rural general industrial. There's also an area of the site that's identified as floodplain. This next slide details all the uses permitted in each zone. The rural commercial and general industrial zones permit a range of uses. More importantly, they both permit provisions for a warehouse, albeit the general rural industrial zone uses are to the benefit of the agricultural community. As for the exception zone uses, there are limited to those that provide uses daycare, bed and breakfast, recreational, athletic facilities, retail, restricted to an antique store, craft shop, farmer's market. All of the uses are prohibited except for a restaurant. Finally, development in the restricted floodplain and subject to the Conservation Authority's approval. As a result of our public consultation, the community identified many concerns and possible impacts. Key land use and engineering factors that were of concern are the floodplain, increased traffic and congestion at 416, water quality and quantity, increased people and car traffic in the village, noise, site lighting, stormwater, impact on gateway features to the nation's capital, benefits to the local community, impacts on the existing residential along Third Line Road, climate change, agricultural traffic, and building heights from 11 meters and 15 meters, respectively, to 30 meters. In reviewing the appropriateness of the application, staff has taken into account the policies of the city's official plan, the provincial policy statement, and technical and public comments received. There are several policies in the official plan that provide direction on rural development. The official plan supports the protection of businesses and economic activity clusters within villages and at strategic locations close to major good movement facilities and corridors such as Highway 416. Such locations provide employment to support the economic health of the community. Preserving locations at these highway interchanges provide for a more efficient and less impactful use of vehicular traffic. Mr. Chair, the principle of these lands to be developed for commercial and industrial uses was established approximately 16 years ago. The proposed amendments to accommodate the warehouse distribution center reflect the reality of a changing market and demand for industrial lands to serve the e-business market. Proximity to major corridors that provide efficient access to local and regional markets is key. Such development serves the community by providing employment opportunities and economic opportunity for existing businesses. Residential vitalities can often experience upswings because of the development of an industry proposed. When considering the current approvals in place, site build-out has the potential to significantly exceed what is being proposed. Additionally, under the current approved subdivision plan and zoning, little is offered that takes into account for provisions for increased setbacks and provisions for buffer areas. The current plan would see development up to 15 meters from the rear yards of the existing residential along Third Line Road. We acknowledge many concerns raised by the community. These matters do require further study and will be approved through the site plan application stage. Should these matters not be appropriately addressed, this development will not be permitted to proceed. Regarding concerns raised with the proposed height and impacts on the residential lots along Third Line, staff is recommending a reduced height to 22 meters and an open space buffer along the rear yards of the existing residential. What you see on the screen is a cross-section that was provided by the developer. What has to be considered is the site is sloped and the developer will need to significantly change the grade to build on a level site. As such, the height that they propose may be increased by means of exception, but this drawing better explains the impact on the ground. As you can see by reducing the grade, the recommended 22-meter height shown in green is not much different than what is permitted as right, the 15-meter height shown in existing grade in red. Understand this is conceptual, of course, but what we do know is significant slopes exist on the site, and managing them will come with a significant grade change. Mr. Chair, staff has concluded that the changes in the OP and the zoning bylaw to permit a warehouse distribution facility are consistent with the direction of the city's official plan and the provincial policy statement. The proposed development builds on the current land use designations and zoning of the site in a manner that maintains the existing principle of development. With proper mitigating measures in place, the impact should be no greater than what is currently permissible in the current zoning. The following amendments are required to permit the proposed use. Amend Schedule A to the Village of North Gore Secondary Plan, redesignating from highway commercial lands to industrial, with the exceptions of lands located in the northwest portion of the site. Amend text in the rural commercial designation by adding additional uses that are principally intended to serve the traveling public will also be permitted. Amend text in the industrial designation by adding uses that benefit the local and regional economy, and by adding text notwithstanding the other provisions of this plan, an industrial building designated industrial located at 1966 Roger Stevens Drive may have a height of 22 meters. With regard to the zoning changes, the lands will be rezoned from rural commercial and rural commercial exception to rural general industrial. The exceptions will include permission for a maximum building height of 22 meters and also reintroduce uses from the old 55R exception. And finally, a 40-meter buffer strip along the rear yards of the existing residential will be zoned as open space. Mr. Chair, staff recommend approval. This ends my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Asafchak. And we do have some delegation, but we have a motion. It's going to be moved by my colleague, Councillor Moffat, to so when residents speak about the item, can speak about the motion as well. And if I may, before we go to Councillor Moffat, or maybe after Councillor Moffat read his motion, I would like to ask staff, especially legal staff, to enlighten the committee and the audience, because I think it's commonly for us what's zoning and what's zoning application or official plan amendment versus the site plan approval, because some of the presentation I received is talk about the water, the traffic, the height, and other, and I think that's all goes with the site plan approval. So I'm going to let Councilor Moffitt introduce his motion, but I would like to ask legal to tell the audience what we are dealing with today is the zoning amendment, not the site plan approval. So with that, Councilor Moffitt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, as you saw in the report already addresses some of the concerns that have been raised in the community. There were some other items that I had, and this motion is largely in line with the notification I sent out to the community just last week. Most people should have gotten that. Just on some things that weren't going to be in the report, but I wanted to address through a motion, because we were still working out the details. So whereas the report recommends a zoning bylaw amendment for the land known municipally as 1966 Roger Stevens Drive, including an increased height limit of 22 meters and an open space buffer of 40 meters from the residential properties to the west. And whereas property owners in the North Gore and Cars area have expressed concern with respect to the conceptual warehouse plan related to such issues as building size, lot coverage, traffic, hydrogeology, floodplain, noise, site lighting, and landscaping. And whereas during the city's site plan control process, these concerns will be addressed and mitigated. And whereas there is a desire by the community to ensure the future development of the site is controlled in such a way as to be no more impactful than the maximum build-out currently allowed as of right. And whereas certain uses permitted in the rural general industrial zone are not desirable for this property. And whereas the open space buffer can be increased and still allow the proponent's conceptual warehouse to be built, therefore be it resolved that the document 1 location map be replaced with the attached map to incorporate an open space buffer of 100 meters from the residential property line, lot lines to the west. Be it further resolved that document 2, details of the recommended zoning of the report in its entirety be amended to be placed with the following changes. Document 2 details the recommended zoning. The proposed change to the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 1966 Roger Stevens Drive. Rezone the land shown in document 1 as follows. And then you saw it earlier, it was the area A, B, C, and D. D is from RG to open space. The first 3 would be adding a holding provision. The intent of the holding provision is that the holding provision cannot be lifted until such time that site plan is approved. So nothing can happen on this site without site plan approval. Add a new exception, RG, to section 240, rural exception provisions similar to the intent of the following. Again, A adds the holding provision to the applicable zones in the RG zone. In column 2, additional land use is permitted in the following. This is the addition of the 55R permissions that were permitted in the middle of the site will now be permitted on the entire site. And then the new parts are added, are these next parts here. In column 4, land use is prohibited. Add the following text: storage yard and waste processing and transfer facility. So those are 2 uses that are permitted today. They will not be permitted in the future. In column V5, provisions, add the following text: the holding symbol may only be removed following approval of site plan control application, maximum height 22 meters, and maximum total volume of all buildings, 1,914,035 cubic meters. So essentially looking at the entire site as to what could be permitted today, what could be built today, what's the total volume of the buildings that could be built today, is actually higher than 1.9 million cubic meters, but we worked on an agreeable size. The concept building would have a volume of approximately 1.4 million cubic meters, which would leave 500,000 cubic meters left for the development. That would mean that no development on the site could be permitted that was over top of that 500,000 cubic meters. Just in relation to other buildings, we talked about, the community's talked about the recreational athletic facility aspect. The Bell Sensplex in Canada is 200,000 cubic meters. Just to give you a sense of what could still fit on the property. But what you can't fit is a second large warehouse. So it doesn't, because at the community meeting and in other discussions since then, the concern was that you raise the height for one purpose, but you raise the height on the entire site. So what we don't want to permit is all of a sudden a number of large buildings on that site. We want to make sure that we're maintaining the intent of the existing volume, and this achieves that. And again, that was from some comments made from the community. So be it further resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act.
So thank you, Councilor Muff. I turn it to Madam Legal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The official plan is the guiding planning principles for the City of Ottawa. So this is where you find your designations. This is where you find council-approved policies on what documents have to accompany development applications in certain areas of the city. The zoning bylaw deals with permitted uses and performance standards, and it must be in conformity with the official plan. And so this is where you get into the nitty-gritty of what can go where on this site with respect to setbacks, height, and permitted uses. Site plan falls under Section 41 of the Planning Act, and that deals with the functionality of the site in the context of the development in the area as a whole. And that is where you look at the elevations for a particular building or structure that's coming in. That is where you deal with the servicing, the grading, and the drainage. You are looking at access and egress to the site, your traffic issues, and any environmental approvals that may have to come in order to permit the site. And that is typically where we see the involvement of the ministry, where that intersection does occur between municipal approvals and provincial approvals. Mr. Chair, if you have any specific questions with respect to zoning and official plan versus site plan, I'm happy to answer them if you're satisfied with that overview.
Thank you very much, Ms. Inta. The holding provision, Councilor Moffett is moving that to empower staff basically to have that if we're not satisfied with so the whole provision will be satisfied before it's lifted. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is something that has been done in the past on certain sites where the city has determined that it is appropriate to look at what's coming in under site plan before the zoning is permitted to come into full effect. So while the zoning may be approved, no building permit can be issued while that holding provision is on the site.
Okay, thank you very much. So we do have, folks, we do have, I think the list now, we have 33 speakers. I would ask you to do your presentation and stick to the timeline. We're not allowing more than 5 minutes for individual. You stay in your seat. If counselor has a question for you, to my colleague counselors, if you have a question coming from the delegation, just flag them to staff and ask staff to respond after all delegation been received, because in concern of the residents' time, I want to deal with the residents first, and any question came from the resident presentation to staff, you can write it down, and then we can ask staff after to address them. With that, I would start, and please be consider of the time. We're going to let you know 30 seconds before your time's out to wrap up. So we start with Miss Adamson. Carlis Adamson? Oh, Miss, sorry. Okay, we have the list. Okay, sorry, I said missed that. My apology, who's doing the presentation, the name? Okay, cards, okay. And James, are you James guy? Okay. So you're going to share the time together, is that correct?
He's just running the
Okay,
presentation.
okay. Just want to make sure we... Okay, sir, please.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you very much for allowing the opportunity, and thanks Scott Moffett for bringing new information to light. I don't have that in my presentation. I am speaking to you as a resident of the village of Cars and on behalf of my son and daughter. All of our properties are just over 3 kilometers away from the proposed warehouse. As the crow flies, 2.5 kilometers. I have lived in the village of Cars since 1949 and have witnessed the evolution and growth of Cars at North Gore for 60 years. Both North Gore and Cars are beautiful and vibrant farming communities. I am not against warehouses as such. I was employed in one when I turned 16 and worked there for 3 years. My brother also worked in the warehouse after me. But this proposed warehouse is beyond the pale. The report to the committee contains interpretations of the city's official plan, secondary plan, and zoning bylaws that push the envelope in support of the proposal. These interpretations have caused considerable angst to residents of North Gore, Cards, Manotick, Osgood, Barrhaven, Kemptville, and other surrounding communities. Their frustration with the consultative process is evidenced by over 1,900 petitions to the city and over 2,900 petitions to the province of Ontario to conduct meaningful community consultation about the traffic impact that the proposal will cause. I oppose the rezoning in light of the large number of concerns with the proposal and the basis upon which the recommendations to committee were framed. We put forward that zoning bylaws are the final step in the process. The PPS provides overall guidance, as was explained earlier. The official plan implements objectives and policies and provides legal basis to manage land and future developments, and zoning bylaws serve to protect against conflicting and dangerous land use. In particular, we will draw to your attention concerns with the key sections referenced in the report. The first one already was mentioned, is the citywide employment area policies. The second one, section 231.43, transportation section, and section 2.23, managing growth. Details about OPA 150 and 180 referencing designation of rural employment areas will be presented in detail by members following. But briefly, OPA 150 and 180 designates rural employment areas. The site is not designated as a rural employment area, and strategic locations do not include sites within villages. The provincial policy statement 2014 guiding principles are: ensure appropriate transportation, water, sewer, and infrastructure availability, protect people, property, and community resources by directing development away from flood-prone areas. For rural areas, one should build upon rural character and leveraging rural amenities. Rural settlement areas shall be the focus of growth and development, and their vitality and regeneration shall be promoted. When directing development in rural settlement areas in accordance with policy, planning authorities should give consideration to rural characteristics, the scale of development, and the provision of appropriate service levels. This proposal does not conform to PPS 2014.
You have 30 seconds, please, sir.
Sorry?
You have 30 seconds left.
My colleague will take over and elaborate on these matters, but I think there are so many discrepancies or flaws in the proposal submitted by the city that we need to take a very careful look at the proposal. As the chair mentioned, I only have 30 seconds, but I would like to thank you for your kind attention and opportunity to voice my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adamson. I know this is great, guys. You want to clap, but please, that will take more time for the other presentation. So let's please, for your own time and the other staff time, so Mr. Graham, please. James Graham next. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Put your mic on, James. It's okay.
Thank you, Chair. My name is James Graham. I'm a senior research.
Can you speak closer to the mic, James, please?
I'm a senior research and development engineer with Synopsys Incorporated and a resident of North Core, Ontario. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I would like to present to you the community's objections to the proposed zoning bylaw and official plan amendments. Specifically, I would present why the staff rationale to support the application has flaws, including specific sections of the official plan and provincial policy statement that do not support the proposal. Here I've highlighted the sections here used by the staff to support the proposals on page 4, 17, and 18, that the city will preserve lands for employment uses. This section relates to a comprehensive review process, and the employment land studies of OPA 150, OPA 190 identified the rural employment areas, including the strategic locations along 400 corridors within the city limits. And these specifically excluded the Highway 416 and Roger Stevens Drive interchange. Furthermore, I highlight another section used by the staff report on page 4 and 18 in that it states that the city will preserve the strategic locations. Again, the OPA 150 and OPA 180 identified strategic locations to conform to the Provincial Policy Statement 2014, and these specifically excluded the site in question. The policy states that the requirements to intercept goods by smaller, more energy-efficient vehicles, and there is no indication that the client will be transferring goods to energy-efficient vehicles. Furthermore, I've highlighted another section here used by staff on page 17, specifically managing growth inside the Greenbelt, within villages, and at strategic locations close to major goods and movement facilities. And legally, and here is interpreted to exclude villages. And as you can see on the map, the site in question is clearly within our village boundary. Furthermore, the proposal doesn't conform to the official plan. I've highlighted here sections of the plan that do not support the proposal and were not identified in the city staff report. That first, the city staff is obligated to encourage development to urban employment areas within the Greenbelt, to provide the opportunity to cluster areas of like employment, and that it is incompatible with surrounding land use. It is impossible to reduce or eliminate the visibility of the proposed site. This proposal aims to have a single employer and use, and this site is not surrounded by essential linkages, supply chains, or service providers. Official planned land designations for villages requires that development does not impact negatively on adjacent residential uses by ensuring noise, fumes, heavy equipment movement will not be permitted in a village and we will redirect it to the general rural area. And in the November 2016 Ottawa Land Employment Review final report that extends to 2036, it specifically excluded the Roger Stevens Drive and Highway 416 interchange. Again here, to re-emphasize what was stated earlier, this proposal is within a rural village and is not included in Schedule A of the rural employment area. Furthermore, this proposal is inconsistent with the provincial policy statement of 2014. I've highlighted here the specific sections that do not support the proposal. The guiding principles of the provincial policy statement are not supported, and these specific sections are non-conforming with respect to the rural areas. It does not build upon the rural character. The vitality and regeneration of the rural area is not being promoted. Consideration for rural characteristics in regards to the scale and development and appropriate service levels are non-conforming. So in summary, I would like to reiterate, this is not a rural employment area, and by the guidelines of the official plan is to designate these types of developments to rural employment areas, and it should be done through a comprehensive review process. The proposal does not conform to the official plan. The site is designated within a village boundary. There are no opportunities for clustering of like employment. It's incompatible with the surrounding land use, which is agricultural
You
and
have 30
residential.
seconds, James.
Thank you. The site is not an essential linkage, and the proposal is inconsistent with the provincial policy statements. For appropriate services are not available, which includes transportation, water, and sewage.
It does not build upon the rural character. And I ask you as members of the Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee to consider your mandate and support the rural residents in trying to maintain their rural character.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. Thank you. Next speaker is Laura Tupper, and after Laura Tupper is Dave Tupper. Ms. Tupper, you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, staff, and neighbors. On April 16th of this year, the City of Ottawa Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management, chaired by my councillor, Scott Moffat, passed a motion that was adopted a week later by City Council to declare a climate change emergency. One of the undertakings in this motion was to direct city staff to embed climate, and I'm quoting, embed climate change considerations across all elements of city business. I suggest that the proposed amendments to the official plan and the zoning bylaws are an important part of your city business. They are an important part for me and for the community in which I live. Councillor Gore, you are quoted by the Global News as having stated that cities are the economic and social engines in our world today, and as such, we have to be leaders. And I think the motion, and he's referring to the climate change declaration, I think the motion sends a clear message to staff, to other levels of government, and to our residents that this is something we need to act on and is a priority for the city and the council. I couldn't agree more. I'm looking to the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee for leadership. Regrettably, it seems that the message to embed climate change considerations across all elements of city business was not clear to staff. I have reviewed the report outlining the department recommendations, and I cannot find a single reference to climate change, even though I had raised the issue in my written comments on October 24th. I am surprised that the section dealing with environmental implications is silent on climate change, as is the section identifying term of council priorities. If climate change is not a priority for the current term of council, what was the declaration of a climate change emergency about? Surely it's about more than headlines. Why am I bothering to bring this to your attention? Why do I think you need to ensure that you live up to your commitment and embed climate change considerations in your decision on this amendment? Let's take a look at that. The concept under consideration suggests that there will be up to 1,700 people employed at the site. The traffic study suggests that 1,800 vehicles will enter and leave the employee entrances to the site every day. Given the rural nature of the community, it's reasonable to predict that the average commute will be 20 kilometers one way. Let me put this in context for you. The total distance driven every day by employees at the warehouse would be like driving more than 1.5 times around the globe. More than 1.7 times, to be precise. It appears that a lot of weight is being placed on the provincial policy statement. Although I am not familiar with the document, the departmental recommendations suggest that transportation systems should be provided that are safe, energy efficient, and facilitate the movement of people and goods. Without public transit to the site, it is not credible to suggest that the policy intent of section 1.6.71 has been met. Furthermore, I understand that the public policy statement addresses the protection of human health and safety related to both natural hazards and human-made hazards. I think that many people, including those who supported the
You have
City of
30
Ottawa
seconds, Laura.
declaration of a climate change emergency, believe that climate change is a human-made hazard that is causing significant economic, environmental, safety, and health risks. To ignore that fact in your decision-making today flies in the face of the policies of Canada, the province of Ontario, and most importantly, the City of Ottawa. I'm here to ask you to ensure that any amendments to accommodate the proposed warehouse concept be conditional on the development and implementation of a climate mitigation strategy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tupper. Any questions? Ms. Tupper, can you stay for a second? Any question for the delegation? No, see none. Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Dave Tupper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. We live in a gravel road, the second line road, which is less than a kilometer from a proposed development. The communities of Cars and North Gore have a long history exceeding 200 years. Agriculture always has been and continues to be the single largest engine of economic output. I have a professional and educational background in agricultural economics and public policy. We actively farm growing corn and soybeans. When this property was rezoned 20 years ago with the building of 416, it was envisioned that it would be an industrial park for businesses which supported the community, but would also benefit from highway access. Perhaps as many as 150 to 200 jobs might have been contemplated, which in and of itself would have been the single largest center of employment in the ward. It was viewed as an opportunity, and in some respects it still is. Mr. Oftiachuk cited a number of city and provincial authorities, but did not mention that the existence of the North Gore Secondary Plan, which provides a lot of guidance in terms of local development. And so this, at one level, sort of begs the question whether these sorts of decisions are being made in the local community or whether they're driven from City Hall and Queen's Park. The very first sentence of the North Gore Secondary Plan is that the North Gore Secondary Plan is a guide for the long-term orderly development of the village of North Gore, taking into account its unique rural setting. North Gore may have a population of as many as 1,500 people. What's being proposed is larger by a factor of 10 or more in terms of the number of employees and the footprint that the community had originally planned for. This fails the test of orderliness as required by the secondary plan. It is disruptive in the extreme and will permanently and adversely change the fabric of the community. It can only be viewed as an atomic event of development, a short-term cataclysm, not a long-term orderly growth, as the secondary plan suggested. On the issue of height, the majority of the site is currently zoned highway commercial for a maximum height of 11 meters, which is consistent with the North Gore secondary plan. Under Section 4 of that plan, land use designation states that the maximum permitted height will be 3 stories, with the exception of the village church steeples. All zoning, including highway commercial and rural industrial, are captured in that statement. More fundamentally, I am not aware that either the proponent or the city staff have advanced any rationale for increasing the height of the zoning height above the 3 stories, other than observing that there are a very few warehouses in other parts of North America with greater height requirements. If a client has a need for some specific height greater than the existing zoning allowances, that is when ARAC should give this issue consideration. In the absence of analysis or justification, my advice is to sit tight. My written submission to you also speaks of the need for on-demand traffic lights at the intersections of Roger Stevens and the 2nd and 3rd lines. I understand the traffic concerns are mostly addressed at the site plan stage. I'm almost beside myself with the temerity of the proponent and the city staff on page 18 in claiming that the site is idle. Land under consideration has been in continuous agricultural production for more than 200 years. Many speakers in the public forum, as well in written submissions, made reference to the role and needs of agriculture in this area. They are not referenced in the city recommendations to you. That is an incredible oversight and an embarrassment.
I know you love to
Not my
clap.
time.
I know, but I know you love to clap, but you're taking away from his time. So if you please, if you really want to clap, just put your hand in the air. We know you're clapping for them. So.
Sure. In addition to the lack of commentary about agriculture or the rural character of the community, the city recommendations document fails to mention a number of other issues. And I just, as a few off the top of my head, the proposal would represent the single largest private sector employment on one site in the region. Surely that's significant to you. The proponent would likely be the largest taxpayer in the ward and probably crack the top 100 in the city. And there is no reference concerning the provision of the required policing and emergency services in a rural area. This is just sort of a sampling of the kind of considerations that you need to take into effect during your deliberations.
You have 30 seconds, sir.
Certainly, I'm going to get right in there. The short story is that I and others implore the committee to instruct the proponent either develop the site as was intended in keeping with our local aspirations or find another site suitable to their purposes. As a community, the benefits of a single industry warehouse are few and the costs high. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question to the delegate? Okay, thank you, Mr. Tupper. Next speaker is Debbie Bishop.
Good day, committee councilors, good day, committee members, and thank you for taking the time to listen to our concerns regarding this application. My name is Debbie Bishop, and I live at 6677 Third Line Road South, and I object to this zoning amendment. The word transparency in business or governance is defined as honesty and openness. Everything you have heard so far and will continue to hear from my colleagues will be transparent. We purchased our 2-acre property from Gary Jordan in 2003. We sat with him at his home and reviewed the Jordale Acres plan. Questions were asked and answers given, and we were completely aware of what we were buying into. That's transparency. My husband and I, as well as 10 other property owners bordering the proposed development area, received notification dated July 30th for the application for an official plan amendment and rezoning of 1966 Roger Stevens Drive. A public meeting was later scheduled for September 12th. It was to be attended by our councillor Scott Moffat and other city officials, as well as representation from the developer, Broccolini Construction. The meeting was then rescheduled on very short notice from September 12th to October 17th. The reason given, Broccolini wasn't ready. This arbitrary action provided an additional 26 days for the developer to prepare and delay, while at the same time eliminating 26 days for community awareness and for my colleagues and I to prepare for this meeting before the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee. Overall, we waited 55 days for the public meeting and had 34 days to prepare. During the public information meeting, October 17th, we were told this was a done deal. It's going to happen. How could this be? Is this open and honest practice? A decision already made before public consultation? Where's the transparency in this? The local community must have the opportunity to voice their concerns when faced with a proposed change of this magnitude. They have the right to ask questions and obtain feedback as to what is being proposed and what effects it will have on their life in the community. The project circumvents the proper planning process, which means there is lack of transparency. With lack of transparency comes lack of trust. Why aren't we being told the type of tenant with whom Broccolini is engaging? Why are studies provided based on data collected 15 plus years ago? Why are conceptual drawings provided by Broccolini misleading, illustrating 27 loading bays as opposed to the 63 planned? illustrating approximately 150 parking spots as opposed to the 1,800 planned. I suggest this is very misleading and lacks transparency. Should council approve this application, 89 days will have passed since July 30th. 89 days to decide. It's okay to build a 22-meter-high building, 700,000 square foot mega warehouse that is not on city water or sewer. It backs onto residential properties, operates 24/7 with 5 tractor trailers arriving per hour, up to 1,700 vehicles arriving and departing at shift change, affecting traffic flow, has 63 loading bays, parking for 1,800 vehicles, space for 240 trailer drops, pretty much constant noise with lights, concrete, and asphalt everywhere, all in the lovely village of North Gore, and all without proper up-to-date studies. 89 days. Thank you, members of the committee, for listening to our concerns, and we respectfully ask this project be deferred. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bishop. Any questions for the delegation?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker is James Banks.
Good morning. My name is James Banks. My wife and I have lived on the west side of Third Line Road, across from residential properties bordering the proposed warehouse location for 44 years. I'll be talking about process, outlining our legitimate concerns, and making a reasonable request regarding the rezoning. As far as we're concerned, the Broccolini application is incomplete, and rezoning should be deferred. Beginning with process, we understand that the traditional process has been followed. However, given a project of this scope and size, we feel that the process may not be applicable. This is not a routine zoning change from a previous zoning. Although there may be overlapping permitted uses, this is a development of a completely different magnitude from that on which the current zoning was approved. Important studies, hydrogeological assessment and terrain analysis, stormwater management report, and all outstanding matters pertaining to the traffic impact assessment that could affect the viability of this project of this scale are being deferred until after the zoning change, giving tacit approval to the concept before serious fundamental issues are examined and the public has been given a fully informed opportunity to assess and respond to the impact of a project of this scope and size. Examples of unknown impacts identified in the proposal and staff reports include there will be 12 times the water taking, currently 16 meters versus forecast 191 liters per minute. That's 276,000 liters per day demand. Roughly 4,000 vehicles and 30 trucks accessing Roger Stevens Road during 2 1-hour AM and PM peak hours. There's unknown increased storm and commercial water volume management data. There will be 20 times the number of people, currently 160 per day versus forecast 3,400 per day. There are no details on developer managed waste plan. There's unspecified land grade changes, and no consideration has been given to the impact of climate change. Given that the current proposal cannot be viewed as a routine zoning change, and certain expert data is unavailable as of yet, no one can predict the long-term implications to the surrounding area. Legitimate concerns include, will impacts affect the quality and quantity of the local area domestic water supply? Will insufficient stormwater management cause increased flooding? Will waste management deficiencies cause pollution of Stevens Creek and surrounding properties? How will increased traffic at peak during the winter months affect work times, travel times, school bus safety, farm-related activities? How will 24/7 truck noise, car, air pollution, all-night lighting, perpetual daylight impact on adjacent crops and the public's health, safety, and well-being? As for our requests, we ask the committee to further defer further consideration of the application until such time as the applicant has completed the studies required to resolve the previously noted unknowns, demonstrated, if possible, how the concerns will be mitigated, and proven that the project is viable and the project will do no harm. And the city and public have had reasonable opportunity to consider and respond to the new information. Until such time as the required studies are completed, there's insufficient expert data available to indicate that the surrounding area can support an operation of this scope and size, and rezoning this property now takes a giant leap of faith with too many unknowns. Valid reasons to delay the rezoning until after the studies are: the cost of doing the studies will be the same regardless when completed. Rezoning now accomplishes nothing more than giving tacit approval of the concept. Deferring zoning has no impact on the application going forward. If the studies prove the project isn't viable, we're not stuck with zoning provisions that can't be fulfilled or that may make the land unavailable for smaller, more appropriate uses.
Mr. Banks, you have 30 seconds left.
Deferring rezoning until after the required studies are completed by peace of mind for not only residents but also the members of the committee. If studies prove the project is viable, rezoning can go forward if the site can be serviced and the public concerns are mitigated. I respectfully request that if the committee is not convinced to reject this proposed zoning, it, at very least, pass a motion to defer its decision until this aforementioned vital information has been provided and assessed.
Thank you, Mr. Banks.
Thank you for your time.
To the audience, I'm asking you for the last time, please, you're delaying the process, you're delaying yourself. We understand this is emotional to you, and we're listening here respectfully. I'm asking you respectfully, please, we don't need the clap, we don't need the jeer. Just let the presenter present. Next, Ms. Graham, Kristen Graham. No relation to Mr. Graham. The reason I said that because she answered the phone sometimes.
I was looking forward to my round of applause. I just want to say that. What do I click? Not. Oh, it's only one, so it's okay. Okay. Good afternoon, committee members, city staff, friends and neighbors, members of the press. My name is Kristen Graham, and I live at 2146 Maple Forest Drive in North Gore. I'm a mother of 4 beautiful children, and I teach grade 7 at Glashan Public School. I'm a lifelong rural resident, as is my husband. I grew up in your ward, Councillor DeRuse, in Metcalfe. My parents still live there. When my husband and I moved back to Ottawa, we were just starting our family. We wanted a place with a sense of community, where the kids would feel a connection to their school and to their neighborhood. Like some of you, we wanted a rural lifestyle. We wanted fresh air, less people, a bigger yard. We wanted quiet, but we shouldn't have had 4 kids if we wanted quiet. North Gore was the place for us, equidistant from Canada, where James was working, and Metcalfe, so we could be close to my parents, possibly get some occasional free babysitting. Since the community meeting, over and over again, we have been told that we have no choice. We have been told that we have no voice. We have been told that this was a done deal. We were told that you, the members of ARAC, would defer to the ward councillor and that we would have no say in the matter. In fact, when a community member posted an online petition on social media, our own ward councillor responded that it wouldn't matter how many signatures we got, that it wouldn't make a difference. Well, I'm here very proud to say that, as was widely reported in the press over the last couple of days, we have received almost 3,000 handwritten signatures asking for a delay until proper consultation has been done. We have spoken to literally thousands of people, the vast, vast majority of whom oppose this zoning change. As ARAC members, it is your job to, where'd he go?
It's there. It's up.
Oh, sorry. As ARAC members, it is your job to actively encourage the establishment and prosperity of farms and related businesses. The current zoning was specifically designed with purpose and intention to encourage the establishment of farm-related businesses and agricultural operations. The current zoning preserves the quality of life in rural areas. The zoning application changes simply do not. According to your mandate, you're to encourage the orderly development and management growth that maintains and strengthens the character of the city's rural areas, including its hamlets and villages, and promotes the concentration of growth within established and planned areas. We contend that this zoning change is not orderly development. This is not growth that maintains or strengthens the character of our village in any fathomable way, as it will not assist the farming community, it will not promote tourism, and it will not assist the local residents. We cannot find another warehouse of this magnitude in a non-serviced rural village anywhere. Again, your mandate is to encourage growth that strengthens the character of the cities and rural villages. This warehouse would be a gross detriment to our community. This is undeniable. My request to you today is simple. Be true to your mandate, be true to your constituents, be true to the official plan, and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Graham. Any question to our presenter? No? Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Tristan. Mr. Jim Pearson? Oh, you're here already. Good. Next speaker is Teddy Laframboise.
No.
Oh, that's Teddy? So, no, we have Jim Pearson first? No?
Yes, I'm
That's
right here.
Jim Pearson.
I'm here.
Somebody said no, it's not. Okay. So go ahead,
Okay.
sir, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. My name is Jim Pearson, as everybody is aware now. I lived in the village of North Gore for 30 years, and I was originally involved with the rezoning that took place from rural to the current designation. That was back a few years ago. I guess the essence of what I'm saying here is that current zone, or the current zoning, reflects the vision of the community. So in essence, a lot of work went into that particular zoning, and it represents what we wanted to the community, and that's why we're very happy with what we got. The land, by the way, as indicated, is a very large portion of the village of North Gore. So this proposal will take a big portion of our village, and it will not, in my mind or in a number of people's minds, take into consideration, help, or encourage our village businesses. I know it was said that we're going to get a whole bunch of jobs because of this, but in essence, it's not jobs that support the village nor support the community. Other items were not mentioned. Next slide. I'm not going to go over this too much because, in essence, I think it was well covered by a number of folks, including the planner. One thing I do want to mention or reinforce is the fact that there are no other commercial areas available in this in the village of North Gore. What does that mean? It means that the jobs that we're supposed to support the community in this area are not going to be available anymore. Next slide. The current zoning, if we look at the proportions of what land use is going to be with the new proposal versus what we had, we have roughly 50% of the land was RC, 50% was RG, and a small portion for recreational. If we look at the proposal now, it's 2.0 for RC. That's a heck of a reduction from the 45. And 97.98 is RG. Not only that, but we're going up higher by 22 to 22 meters. And the proposed zoning, if we just use warehousing, would be 80% of, if we put all warehousing in the RG, it would have represented 48%. So that is a big chunk just for warehousing. So that's all we're doing, is putting warehousing, as opposed to the many other opportunities. I guess with regards to the mega warehouse, the official plan, I guess the strategic direction tells us that we need to minimize the impact of truck traffic on residential neighborhoods, according to that section. It also indicates that if we have rail traffic in the city, that we would promote the use of the rail and trucking, such to minimize climate change and other reasons. I guess one area that I would really like to focus on is the guiding principles, the directions for building livable communities. This is in the official plan. These are statements from the official plan. Enhance the sense of community. This is not going to enhance the sense of community. Maintaining places with their own distinct identity. This is not, I guess we'll get distinct, but not in the...
Okay, you have 30 seconds left, Mr. Pearson.
Okay, I'll define public and private spaces. Safe and accessible, respects character of existing areas, can adapt and evolve easily over time, understand and respect natural processes, and maximize energy efficiency. I guess in conclusion, the official and secondary plan are not reflected in the rezoning, and it rejects the respect planned vision for the community development. ARAC is mandated to protect the public from development proposals like this. ARAC must consider the impact of this development. History will speak.
You passed your time, Mr. Pearson, but thank you. I got the message. But we do have a question for you. Don't go anywhere. So I have a question from my colleague.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Just a quick question. You had mentioned that you were involved with the process back in the 1990s on the original zoning.
That's correct.
And that it was intended to be a specific use, specifically tailored to the agricultural community. So one thing I'm not clear of is the specific uses that were permitted at that time and how they fit into that. I thought maybe you might have a recollection as to why. So some of the permitted uses on the industrial side, so the side closest to the residential lots on Third Line Road, were assembly plant, commercial garage, fabrication plant, a machine shop, a manufacturing plant, a maintenance garage, a processing plant, and of course a warehouse. All those uses that were permitted uses back in 1997, how do those specific uses, like there are the other uses too, the farm implement, sales, repairs establishment, I get that one. But the other ones, how do they align with the vision that was at the time?
I think they very much align to those, because it's the whole community, right? So if we looked at the uses, and I'd like to kind of go through them because they're not in front of me here, but in essence, it is something that will support a viable community according to my interpretation. So but I guess I don't really understand your question.
Well, I don't know how a manufacturing plant fits in a village.
A small it's the scope.
There's no size requirements though, right? For this site, there are no size requirements. I know there was some discussion about Schedule 9 of the plan. North Gore doesn't apply to Schedule 9 of the plan for the official plan of the City of Ottawa. So there are there's only 50% lot coverage.
Yeah, so what, I guess, my interpretation of what you're asking is you're trying to nitpick, oh yeah, this is just a small little thing, or it doesn't support it, this one item will not support it. To me, it's the thought process that went into it, not to pick and just like we're doing with warehouses right now, you're picking warehouses. Okay, well, warehouses are okay. Look, it's there, and there, right? But if you look at the actual vision, it wasn't just warehouse, it was all these other facilities that support the community, of which I'm sure that there are some that I can, in time, be able to give you some information on, but.
We can talk another time.
Okay.
I'm interested in one question you said, Mr. Pearson. You said this warehousing does not even create job, but does not benefit the village. I'd like to understand that how, because let me tell you why I said that in good faith. So Nortel, when the military moved to Nortel, and it's far away from West Carleton and Canada and Sittville, all that area real estate went sky high, as we all know. So we're so far from it, but we still benefit from it. So why would you say this will not benefit any to the, I'd like to understand your thought on this one.
Okay. I guess we will talk to employment because we have folks talking along that lines, but the employment that we envisioned was employment, one that was a bigger variety of skill sets. It was employment that actually would help the farming community. This is not going to help the farming community.
No, I'm just trying to clarify. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Any other question? No? Thank you, Mr. Pearson, for your presentation. Next is Teddy Laframboise. Teddy is, you keep waving that lady. Are you waving for something? Is he here? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay.
You said I could raise my hand.
Okay, I thought you were waving me down, that's why. Okay, all right. Go ahead. Put your mic on, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Do we have to sit down?
You don't have to if you like to
We
stand
need a
up.
standing mic, though. I also have some advice for you, so don't start the clock yet.
Okay.
Is that maybe you have a clock on the table so we know? No. That we can look at.
I'll tell you 30 seconds before your time.
Yes, I know you do, but you interrupt us.
Correct, but we don't have that to see now.
Okay, I'm going to deal, I'd like to speak, well, first of all, I'm Teddy Laframboise. I live at 6439 Second Line Road. As the crow flies, 1 kilometer and across the highway from the proposed site. First, I want to discuss employment, and second, a little bit touch on flooding. I'm an employer in the area, and in the winter, I have 5 full and part-time employees, and in the summer, I have 10 plus. There's a labor shortage in rural Ontario. The statistics say that Canada has its lowest unemployment rate in 43 years, at 5.4, I think it is. Ottawa has an unemployment rate of 4.2. There are not really good studies in rural Ottawa for unemployment, but it's expected that we are under 3. It is very hard to find people to work on the farm. When they built the Rideau Canal, they imported Irish workers who caught malaria and died. Right now, for the first time since the Rideau Canal construction, many of our local farmers are using migrant labor. Abbey Hill and Millers, for example, are bringing in people from Jamaica. That's because we cannot find employees, especially farm employees. This development will be in direct competition to us. That is not supporting your agricultural or rural community. How many people would rather maybe work in one of these facilities than face the minus 40-degree weather that farm staff have to? There are also many disadvantages to working in these communities, but I will not go into that here. I mean, in these kinds of warehouses. The other issue that has come up is what Scott and Jim were just talking about, is the word warehouse. This is my first foray into zoning and bylaws and policy, but it's very much a question of semantics. In 2003, when this zoning was established, these distribution centers, or fulfillment centers as they were called, did not exist. I have written our premier to say that they need a different category for this type of building because it's not what was understood as a warehouse in 2003 and before. It needs its own separate list of requirements. Of course, one of them for sure being municipal services. Then the last thing I'd like to discuss is water. I live downstream of the proposed development. Go ahead, Andrea. If we can find it. This is a hayfield. It has a depression in it. Should put the sound on. Okay, this was an extreme climate event, July 24th, 2017. More and more of these events are anticipated. My husband and I have lived on this farm for close to 35 years. This is evidence that these extreme weather events are going to happen, and I don't care how many holding ponds you build. If you pave over half of that farm with building and asphalt, it is going to
20 seconds left.
it is going to direly affect downstream operations. You can turn it off now.
I don't know how. It's good. It's good background.
So that my conclusion is that I think everything should be halted on this process until we get up-to-date floodplain maps.
Okay, thank you very much. Any question for, okay, Councillor Moffat?
Just a quick comment, Teddy. I'm on the board of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, and they are updating the floodplain mapping for Stevens Creek in 2020.
Okay, so shouldn't that be a prerequisite before you change the zoning of such magnitude?
No, because they'll have to build that into their site plan. Yes, that's right. Everything is site plan.
True? Yeah.
Well, I beg to differ.
Okay. I presume the next speaker is that Sigran? Is that who? Okay. The next speaker is Jatka Kapsa.
I'm here. I'm
after,
waving
after
at
you. After you. I said after you. Gosh, we're not fighting with you guys. We just wanted to be keeping you going.
Can somebody help me with this thing? Because it's got a timer clicking and it's making me nervous. Can you just get it to regular? Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. Can you hear me? Sigrun Kulik. I'm an agricultural entomologist trained at the University of Guelph, Ontario Agricultural College. I've spent most of my career supporting the agricultural sector, and I've chosen to live in North Gore, the rural community thereof, because I really enjoy that lifestyle, and my family does as well. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. When I first heard about this proposal, one of the things that I got concerned about is what is the long-term economic implication for me and my family in this area and for others that live there for the community. So I started thinking about what are the key ingredients for a successful mega warehouse project, and are these ingredients present in North Gore? And what are the long-term outcomes of this type of development, and what are the opportunity costs for the community of this type of thing? So I did a bit of research, and DeBroda et al., I've provided the references at the end of my presentation, and I'm sorry, I had to make some assumptions because the proponent for this zoning change has not provided us with who their client is, and I'm sure they have one. So some of the key requirements are cheap real estate with access to the national road network, readily available skilled labor pool, access to and capacity of the local road network and alternative modes of transports, excellent infrastructure, away from residential buildings, and community buy-in. I think a number of us have already spoken to a bunch of these criteria, so I won't bother going through them. But I think the only one I can see it has, it's cheap, and it's close to a 400 series highway. As far as the local labor pool is concerned, as Teddy pointed out, Ottawa employment is at 4.2%, and this would directly compete with agricultural employers. And there's a lack of public transit, further shortening the access to the labor pool. But let's look into this a little deeper. What are the long-term economic impacts of something like a warehouse distribution center? In a 2018 study of 95 Amazon fulfillment centers in 25 US states, they analyzed what this did for jobs in the area. While warehousing-related jobs increased significantly, the overall jobs fell flat. Probably, and we're not clear on this, for reasons like there just isn't more labor to draw on, or it's actually depressing other businesses in the area. Local governments, and in some cases, jobs actually just decreased regionally. Local governments often give huge tax breaks to these firms. But what the report concluded was that they did not get a return for that investment and would have been better off investing in transit, education, et cetera, just about anything else. Simultaneously, the annual wages for warehouse workers in the area fell by 10%, and the standard deviation on that number is quite large, up to 40%. So does this mega warehouse fit into the North Gore context? A 2018 Industry Distribution Center survey cited that about 55% of the respondents cited labor as their biggest problem. As such, they're going to automation as fast as they can. So any jobs we do gain will likely disappear quite quickly. Also, this industry is quite new. There are a lot of fluctuations in e-commerce, and it's resulting in actually a demand for smaller warehouses that are easier to refit for different uses. Also, revenue per shipment is quite tight profit margin. It's extremely vulnerable to fluctuations in fuel prices, and I'm not convinced that this business model is long-term sustainable, especially when you consider climate change. Particularly important for North Gore is that there is no access to alternative modes of transport such as rail, and it's too far out for drones, electric scooters, et cetera. What is the opportunity cost of this thing for the community? And that is something that the city report, to my mind, did not really speak to. That means, what is the cost of choosing this alternative over what we had proposed to do now and giving us the time to develop that site in our own good time? The proposal will probably benefit Broccolini and whatever Amazon-type business leases that warehouse, but it will take 123 acres of prime agricultural farmland out of production to support a single industry that may or may not have a sustainable business model. It does not support diversification or local businesses, and it directly competes for access to the labor pool with the agricultural community. So, North Gore residents will ultimately reap very little benefit, if any, while incurring numerous traffic, safety, environmental, and infrastructure problems. In conclusion, this permanently blocks us from doing the kind of diversified sustainable activities supported by the provincial policy statement, and I've outlined for you there.
You get a second left.
Yep.
Okay.
It would irrevocably change the rural character of North Gore, as well as neighboring communities such as Kars. I'm therefore asking you to respect the City of Ottawa official plan for managing growth and the secondary plan for North Gore and reject this rezoning proposal. Together, these plans provide a comprehensive long-term vision that supports a diversified agricultural business economy in this area that will allow us to showcase our rural heritage and local foods, build a tourism industry, provide space for recreational activities, and benefit the community directly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any question for our presenter? No? Thank you very much. I think the next speaker is lined up.
So, when do I start?
Go ahead, please, ma'am.
My name is Jitka Kepsa, and my property shares about an 800-meter property line with the site. My husband and I are building a house in North Gore, which we fell in love with for its awesome tight-knit community. I oppose the proposal and amendments. I'm a CPA and will be making an argument about the economic development in North Gore. First, the employment numbers might not be as significant as presented in the proposal. The applicant claims that the distribution center would provide employment for approximately 1,100 to 1,700 employees. It is difficult to take it as a sure thing when so little information is available, but also when we look at the statistics from existing large warehouses. This could be as well an inflated number to sway you to approve the proposal. My research concludes that operations in new large warehouses are intensively automated and machines are replacing workers to maximize efficiency and profits. Why would not the same be done by this mysterious e-commerce tenant that needs to stay competitive? Although the warehouse tenant is not set, let us assume it is similar to the existing Ottawa Amazon warehouse. The initial employment estimate was grossly exaggerated. In May of 2018, it was reported that the warehouse would create 1,000 jobs. However, just 2 months later, that number had already dropped by 40% to 600. I argue that the tenant will likely resort to automatization as employees are already hard to come by in Ottawa due to the record low unemployment rate. Even the local farmers and businesses have a hard time finding workers. In addition, based on traffic projections, it was estimated that only 2% of those employed there would come from North Gore. That said, the proposal is not consistent with the province policy statement because the warehouse would not provide significant regional employment. Now, I would like to focus on the ways in which this warehouse would impede economic development in North Gore. The tenant would benefit from the economies of scale by using such an unusually large warehouse that would provide a competitive advantage to a single large corporation over numerous smaller companies whose services and economic prosperity are needed in our town. Moreover, the warehouse would likely solicit employees of the local agri-food industry and small local businesses. I realize that e-business is a fashionable industry. However, it is questionable to avoid the applicant with the rezoning and the height exception, even if they did not in any way demonstrate the necessity to accommodate e-business market. To conclude this argument, the proposal is not consistent with the province policy statement since the warehouse would not promote the diversification of the economy and job opportunities. Finally, the economic spin-offs for the community that the applicant mentioned in his request were not elaborated on regarding what they could potentially be. I can think of possibly a gas station for all the trucks, perhaps built by the applicant on the small portion of the site that would keep the zoning highway commercial. I believe that the warehouse would not support the vitality and financial well-being of North Gore. On contrary, the warehouse would lower the demand for housing and decrease property values, especially for those living in its close proximity. Really, who would want to live in a village where the rural character is dominated by an enormous, ugly distribution center? The warehouse will not bring any new services to the community as the current zoning is designed to do. Instead, it would lower the quality of existing services. It would not even bring regular bus service to North Gore. For these and many other reasons mentioned by speakers before and after me, a warehouse of this size would be debilitative to building a strong, healthy, and livable community in North Gore. The few benefits of the warehouse to one company do not outweigh the many risks and disadvantages that it would bring to this town that I love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Any question to the delegate? Thank you. Next speaker is Pam Schultz. Childs.
Hi.
Hello, Pam.
Hi.
And after Pam is Andrea.
All right. Good morning, councilors. Excuse me. I'm getting a cold. Committee Chair, my name is Pam Childs. My husband and I are geologists, and we've lived outside North Gore for 23 years, 1996. I'll be speaking about this proposal as it relates to infrastructure. Excuse me again. The staff report found this proposal consistent with the Provincial Policy Statement 2014. However, we found numerous inconsistencies with the Provincial Policy Statement, as you've heard. And so I'm going to keep mine a little tighter and just hit on the highlights. Thank you. I'd like to draw your attention to Section 1141 of the PPS states that healthy, integrated, and viable rural areas should be supported using rural infrastructure and public service facilities efficiently. Section 1154 states development that is compatible with the rural landscape and can be sustained by rural service levels should be promoted. The rural infrastructure to support this proposal has not been adequately studied and has not been demonstrated to be sustainable. There is no substantial analysis of water taking or impacts. An enormous volume of groundwater must be drawn from an aquifer. The necessary study has not been completed. The 1999 study is useless. It is not known that there is sufficient water, and the effects on the aquifer, the neighboring wells, and the village have not been determined. There is no substantial analysis of sewage requirements or impacts. The development will rely on a private sewage treatment facility, which has its own set of environmental concerns. Contamination, leakage, spills, effluent flow, and overflows into the open drain systems, and downstream of which is Teddy's farm. No comprehensive drainage system and floodplain analysis. There's serious concerns in relation to the change of landscape and additional flow to the drainage basin and potential for contamination. There's a deficient road system analysis, and you'll hear about that in a bit more detail. Roger Stevens must be modified to support this proposal. This has not been addressed satisfactorily, and there are many safety concerns. Some of the traffic flow assumptions in the report are erroneous, as people will speak to. Additionally, the following infrastructure does not exist. Public transit, there's none planned, and this is a massive failing. Active transportation corridor, so walking, biking paths, and the like. There's none planned, and that wasn't even addressed. So this is all part of the provincial policy statement asks that municipalities address these issues. Section 111 of the PPS says healthy, livable, and safe communities are sustained by ensuring that necessary infrastructure, electricity generation facilities, etc., are or will be available to meet current and projected needs. Section 1132 also states land use patterns within settlement areas, and that's North Gower, shall be based on densities and a mix of land uses which efficiently use land and resources, are appropriate for and efficiently use the infrastructure and public service facilities which are planned or available, and avoid the need for their unjustified and or uneconomical expansion. Support active transportation. Are transit supportive where transit is planned, exists, or may be developed? I just want to go back regarding water and sewer. The private servicing is the last option in the PPS for that infrastructure after municipal and communal servicing. So section 1.664 says basically, individual on-site sewage and water services may be used provided that the site conditions are suitable for the long-term provision of such services with no negative impacts. In settlement areas, these services may only be used for infilling and minor rounding out of existing development. That's right out of the PPS. It's not been demonstrated that there are no negative impacts, and this proposal is not infill, nor is it rounding out. In summary, so I'll keep it really short, and there's additional problems with the...
You have 30 seconds, ma'am.
The provincial policy statement does not support this development proposal in the matter of infrastructure, amongst other issues, and also the information requirements of the official plan haven't been met. I'm asking you to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any question for the delegate? Thank you, ma'am. Next is Andrea. Oh, Andrea's already lined up. Susan.
I have to find my thing. How do you get rid of this one?
It should be on that one, yeah.
So how do you get this one?
Let's escape, and then let's minimize, and then which one's yours?
Okay.
Give her a double
Next speaker, if you want to line up, is Mr. McNeese, Sandy McNeese. Okay, you're here. Okay.
There you go. If you go up to slide view show, and then from beginning, it'll puff out, so just so.
Perfect. Thank you very much. My name is Andrea Sissons, and I live on a farm in North Gore. I'm a scientist working with the federal government. My specialization is natural resources and plant science. This presentation was developed by myself and Susan Lehman, another resident of North Gore. We are both opposed to the development on Roger Stevens. As I go through this presentation, I'd like you to note that all photos in it were taken in North Gore. So the report to ERAC and Council submitted on November 22nd of 2019 asserts that the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement. However, this is not true. It is not consistent with the provincial policy statement, specifically parts of Section 3 as indicated on this slide, nor is it consistent with the official plan or the Conservation Authorities Act. Page 23 of the planning rationale claims that no development is proposed within the floodplain. However, comparing the site plan with the floodplain overlay, the floodplain is shown in blue on this diagram, shows that the road, the north stormwater pond, a section of the parking lot, and a section of the warehouse will all fall within the floodplain area. As well, the developer's stormwater management report only modeled the storm sewer pipe outflows to the two ponds. It did not include the ditch drainage systems or the uncontrolled flows, and it did not model the 1 to 100 year flood or the 1 to 100 year plus 20% climate change flood event. As you have heard, and I'm sure you're aware, development in a floodplain, surface grading, removal of existing natural water retention systems such as the drumlin and the forest cover, and increased runoff from the building structures and paved surfaces will add significant volumes of water runoff and cause impacts to adjacent properties and Highway 416. Furthermore, both Stevens Creek and the Dillon Wallace Municipal Drain floodplains, which are shown here in the blue, extend onto the Highway 416 southbound ramp where the developer plans to add 2 additional lanes near the top of the Cloverleaf Loop. The remainder of the ramp to the north is in the Stevens Creek floodplain would also need to be raised to take it out of the floodplain. There's considerable uncertainty as to whether the modification of the entire ramp and the compensating mitigations such as regulatory cuts, lane grade raises, and/or stormwater management works would be technically feasible. As such, MTO needs to be consulted to determine whether the proposed modifications would be feasible. We suggest that this should happen prior to approval of the application. Both the Provincial Policy Statement and the Conservation Authorities Act indicate a requirement to assess the development with respect to its impact beyond the site in question. As discussed already, development in a floodplain exacerbates flooding in already flood-prone lands. The potential damage and risk to human health has already been demonstrated on several occasions in the past 5 years. Lost revenues due to failed crops, property damage due to flooded homes and businesses, health and safety concerns with compromised wells and flooded septic systems, compromised electrical and energy safety of flooded buildings, and mobility issues due to flooded roads. The fish in farmers' fields were evidence of the interconnectedness of our land and waterways. Any contaminants that are picked up on flooded surfaces by the floodwaters will eventually make their way back, along with the fish, to the creeks and rivers. As has been mentioned previously, but is worth mentioning again, on April 24th of 2019, City Council declared a climate emergency to deepen its commitment to protecting our economy, our ecosystems, and our community from climate change. Mayor Jim Watson highlighted the flooding threatening the region at that time, as well as the devastating floods of 2017. He said, "There is a connection, and I think when you look at almost every scientific journal and every report that's come out on climate change, these are not coincidences. Climate change science predicts that most floodplains will increase in size, thereby having the potential to increase the impact of this proposal."
You have 30 seconds left, Sandy.
A report by the Center on Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo indicates that flooding is considered to be the highest cost of climate change. This applies equally to having up-to-date data. The repercussion of having ignored the floodplain mapping issues for this long is that at this time, the city is not adequately prepared to process this rezoning request. While this may represent certain economic costs for delayed or missed opportunities, the risks by a rushed decision are not worth it.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
ma'am. Thank you, Andrea. Any questions?
I'll just give you a few more pictures to look at. They're all in North Gore. Geese in the field, that's soon to be a parking lot. And I'll work the slides for you, Cindy.
Okay.
That's okay, I can just crouch here. I'm good at crouching.
No, I've got my. Oh, you've got it written. Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, it's fire.
Yeah, that's the fire station at the bottom. That's a residence house on Third Line Road at the top left. Those are geese in the proposed parking lot. And down below is a tractor in a submerged field.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea and Sandy.
Good
Please
afternoon. Good afternoon, Iraq Committee. First of all, I want to thank the Iraq community. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Quite well.
Got it. Thank the Iraq community for the invitation to speak to you about what I consider a very important issue for myself and my community. My name is Sandy McNeese. I'm a retired CPA, and I've been a long-term resident, I put in here 70 years plus, at the North Gore CARS community. Over the years, I've been a volunteer in a number of organizations in the community and put a high value on community involvement to improve the vitality and quality of life in our area. There are many issues relating to the proposed rezoning and related proposed mega warehouse. In my presentation, I want to focus on the potential incremental flooding issue that would result from this development with its huge 700,000 square foot building and its huge paved loading and parking lot area. I apologize for any duplication with Andrea, my colleague here, but I'm coming at it from a slightly different perspective, direct impact. My farm, which I operate in partnership with my family, is in the 100-year floodplain, which was, oh, there it is, which was established by the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority some years ago. Our farm borders on Stevens Creek, which you can see there, and is just downstream from the proposed project site. My farm area by Stevens Creek floods in current heavy rains and in spring runoff, with floodwater in many occasions rising up to my farm buildings. And you can see the pictures and the mess. I'm not against industrial commercial development on the property in question, but I am very concerned that the current mega warehouse proposal with the supporting consultant studies do not adequately address many of the issues relating to flooding runoff, which would also include effluent runoff from the large warehouse operation. The Ontario Provincial Policy Statement of 2014 clearly sets out rules that need to be adhered to in any development project in the province. The PPS states that to protect people, property, and community resources, development should not be undertaken in flood-prone areas. We are in a flood-prone area. The proposed project site, the surrounding area, and my farm can clearly be demonstrated as being in flood-prone. The project consultant reports do not address the issue of floodplain outside of the site itself. I live in the community and I know the firsthand flooding on our property and in our area. Facts. The floodplain associated with the Dillon Wallace Municipal Grain north of Roger Stevens extends onto the northwest portion of the proposed site. I think you've already seen that on the map. Rideau Valley Conservation Authority staff have confirmed that an updated flood plan mapping study for Stevens Creek is currently ongoing. It's unknown at this time when the study will be updated. Basing development decisions on outdated floodplain data could lead to yet additional future flooding that could have been preventable. There is real potential of compromising local septic systems and drinking water wells. The mega warehouse would certainly contribute to an additional flooding in flood-prone North Gore, since much of the site would be paved and would produce flash runoff. Unlike absorbent and filtering soil, the hard surfaces of roofs and asphalt, especially acres of it, will create a significant amount of water runoff that didn't exist before. It's most likely that floodplains have expanded given the local factors such as increased tiling and drainage of fields, putting additional flow into drainage and waterways. Also, increased development and deforestation, which leads to less water being absorbed on site. We have a situation where municipalities may have had been much too lenient in interpretation of the rules to create a larger municipal tax base. However, when the flood comes and the damages occur, we all pay. In summary, I would request that the ARAC committee deny an approval for the proposed rezoning proposal until a study of floodplain management impact for the proposed development project be completed. The current zoning, which was very thoughtfully designed by our previous councillors to allow economic development for our area, should be respected. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for? Okay, thank you very much, Sandy. Next speaker, Ray. And after Ray is Bruce Hood. Bruce is here. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Just take 1 sec.
It's already there? It's already on the...
No, it's slightly updated.
Oh, okay.
That happens. There you go.
Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Bruce?
Hi,
Go
my name
ahead,
is
sir.
Ray Steger. I am an electrical engineer. I've worked in the high-tech community for the last 25 years here in Ottawa, and I'm a resident of North Gore. I've been there for the last 10 years.
Can you speak to the mic, Ray, directly so they can hear you?
I can, thank you.
Please.
Today, I would like to take the opportunity to talk about some of the traffic issues. I know it's related to site plan, but I want to show you impact, just so you know. So what I want to address is, if I can go forward here. There we go. What I want to address is what the real impact is with this mega warehouse and some of the deficiencies in the report from Novatech. So the Novatech report highlights, and you've heard a lot of this already, but I'll just hit the top points, that 1,000 cars come and go at AM hours, 1,000 cars at PM hours. They assume 93% of the traffic will come from the 416. And they also highlight traffic queues, 100 to 290 meters long. That's 25 to 80 cars, or that's 1 football field to 3 football fields of traffic. And it also highlighted in the report that there is some deficiencies in terms of pedestrians and cyclists, and there's generally increased traffic. So what I want to highlight, which is just common sense, if you look at the study, there's several erroneous assumptions. So one, it infers all traffic increases are to the local 416 area. It ignored traffic that comes from Smith Falls or Richmond or even Canada. The accident study is focused near the 416, and there's actually no mention of secondary truck traffic. That is, trucks that are going to be unloading, take us up to or other areas that are close to Ottawa. They talk about semis and talk about workers, but not the other traffic, and that's going to be a factor. So what I've done the last few weeks, I'm an electrical engineer, I'm not a traffic guy, but I did do some reading. And what I did learn is that traffic is like electricity or water. It takes the path of least resistance. So what it's going to try and find a sneak path to get around delays. That's what happens. So what means is that the proposal that they showed, the traffic on the 416 is not quite true. It's going to spread out across through cars, through Manotick, through North Gore. That's just what's going to happen. So what I tried to do to get an idea of what this really means in terms of traffic, I sat at Hunt Club in Green Bank on Friday at 4 o'clock. And the reason I picked that intersection is that there's 2 lanes going east, 2 lanes going west. And I just sat there in time. Okay, but how long does it take to get through the lights? How many cars do you get through? So the traffic lights at Hunt Club in Green Bank are 45-second intervals, just so you know. In the 45 seconds, you can get 44 cars. That's what you get consistently through, plus or minus 1 or 2. So what it ends up being is that for 135 seconds, you get 44 cars, because it has to go through different lights. It goes this way, advanced green, and north-south. So if you look at the next slide, this is what the site looks like. And if I do this quickly, the black is what the report directly from Novotech. The color is me. So if you look here, this is North 416. It shows 78% coming from the north, 15% coming from the south. That's the traffic. There's 4 lights there. 3 are recommended in the report. The 4th I put there, and I'll show you why in a second. One of the things that you see, independent of all the other traffic lights, the 1 light here, all that traffic has to go through 1 light. So the 1,000 coming, 1,000 going. To clear 1,000 cars through that intersection will take an hour. Back to back, back to back. And that will mean traffic will push out onto the 416. There is no question. It says 290 meters, it's going to be out to the 416. So what it doesn't include, once that traffic happens, what's going to happen? People start going to go left to try to get up 3rd line to get to Prince of Wales to get to Manotick, or go left to 4th line to get up through hit Canada or go to Smith Falls. So the traffic is not as they show it, and that's a fundamental flaw. It's going to be a lot more traffic coming through the North Gore city, or town, village, and that's important to us because that's where our kids go. I have 2 kids, one at North Gore Public and one at Cars. That's critical to us. And what the thing is, if this is the report that is flawed with data coming in, it's flawed with data going out. And it's just common sense. Do any of you believe that the traffic is going to be 93% using the 416? That's a question, you guys.
Go ahead with your presentation. You have 30 seconds left.
Okay. Reality is not going to be like that. So from my point of view, it's fundamentally flawed. It's going to be a major impact to North Gore. For somebody to go from 3rd line here to get to the 416, that's at least 3, if not 4 light cycles. That's 6 minutes minimum, or if there's queues, it gets up to 18 minutes. Just to go, what normally takes 20 seconds. So everybody leaving, I live in Canada, or North Gore, but I live in Canada, or work in Canada, sorry. That's an extra half hour for me to go to work every day. And it already takes me 25 minutes.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you very much.
I urge you not to put this size of warehouse and reject the proposal. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any question to the? Thank you. Next is Bruce. Bruce Hood is ready in queue. After Mr. Hood's presentation, we're going to take 15-minute bio break. For those in the audience, for the first time, the washrooms in the lobby, both washrooms, and there's a small cafeteria at the end of the hallway as well. Mr. Hood, please go ahead.
Good morning, ARAC committee members. My name is Bruce Hood. I live on 3rd line opposite the Broccolini proposed warehouse. Now retired, I worked as a biologist for federal, provincial, and municipal agencies, mainly on conservation of natural resources and the review of development proposals. I'm concerned the council is about to approve rezoning the property to allow construction of the warehouse based in part on a deficient environmental impact statement. The provincial policy statement, which I'll just refer to as a policy, requires municipalities to manage natural resources sustainably and protect significant natural heritage features and their function from negative impacts due to development and alteration for the long term. This natural capital provides many natural and socioeconomic benefits to society. Species at risk, significant plant and wildlife habitats, ecological integrity and connectedness, biodiversity, natural resources, and hydrologic systems are some of the features and functions that the provincial policy aims to protect. These natural heritage provisions of the policy are incorporated into the Ottawa Official Plan and the North Gore Secondary Plan. Now, in order to ensure that they're implemented and to know exactly how heritage features would be affected and what are present, An environmental impact statement is a tool used to aid municipal decision-making so that they meet the natural heritage requirements. Not only documents existing features, but looks at the potential impacts of a development and recommends ways to avoid and reduce negative impacts to ensure that the policy requirements are met. Because of the scale of this project, and also because a portion of the Lockheed Road Complex natural area is on the southwest corner of the site, a full or detailed environmental impact statement was required. I've reviewed the EIS in detail, and also spoken to other biologists who reviewed it, and we found many errors and omissions that are largely due to insufficient sampling effort. Consequently, it does not provide adequate information to the city to take an informed decision on the rezoning or fulfill its natural heritage responsibilities under the provincial policy. Just to elaborate on that, on-site data collection for the EIS consisted of only a few hours midday on 2 days, one day in June, another in December. Vegetation and wildlife observed during these brief visits was recorded. To inventory and assess the site properly, however, additional site visits would need to be done at various times a day during all seasons and preferably for several years. Otherwise, much is missed. In this case, some species at risk, seasonal and migratory wildlife use, wildlife activity at dusk and night when most wildlife is active, and it doesn't appear that groups such as insects, reptiles, and amphibians, non-vascular plants, and mosses were inventoried at all. For example, some of the things I've observed as a property owner there since 2003 are 4 additional species at risk. Only butternut and barn swallows were recorded in that short survey period. The flooded fields, contrary to the report, are a migration stopover for thousands of waterfowl and shorebirds annually, and you saw a picture in a previous presentation of that. Raptors, that includes hawks and owls, do winter on the property, and I have seen bald eagles there as well, and actually there are some resident raptors. Deer yard in several conifer areas on the property. They weren't noted in the December survey because there was almost no snow, and you would require a foot or more of snow for them to yard. Seeps and vernal ponds.
You have 30 seconds left, Mr. Hood.
Were also not noted. Tree cavities were not noted. And there's wildlife connectivity between this property and forests across 416 going all the way to Cranberry Creek Marsh. I also would say that the Lockheed Road Complex Natural Area study used as major reference was also equally flawed and was extremely outdated, and that the new proposal would remove the drumlin, which other speakers have spoken to. So I would urge council to require a more in-depth, comprehensive study to make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Any question for? Thank you, Mr. Hood. So we have been through 17 speakers, and we still have 17 left. So we're breaking for 20 minutes. We'll be back here 5 after 1. Thank you very much, folks. And for transparency issue, if